My beloved child, there is something I need you to hear, and perhaps the strangest part is that you may already know it somewhere deep inside you. Not as a voice. Not as a sign you have to chase. More like the quiet feeling that appears when a memory suddenly returns and, for a few seconds, the distance between yesterday and today seems almost impossible to measure. The person you love is no longer here in the way you once knew them, and nothing I say should pretend that absence is simple. But before their chapter with you came to its close, there was something they would have wanted you to understand, something easily buried beneath all the things you wish had been said differently, all the moments you replay, all the ordinary days you never realized would become precious. Don't skip what comes next, because the message is not hidden in some impossible mystery. It is much closer than that. It has been sitting quietly inside the love they already gave you. Here is where the story changes. You may have spent time remembering the final conversations, wondering whether there was another sentence you should have spoken, another moment you should have noticed, another way you could have shown what they meant to you. But love is rarely contained in one final conversation. It is built across hundreds of seemingly insignificant moments. The familiar laugh, the look across a room, the small kindness nobody else noticed, the way their presence could make an ordinary place feel different. And if they could place one message into your hands now, perhaps they would not begin by asking you to look backward. Perhaps they would begin with this: do not measure what we had by the moment it ended. Measure it by everything it changed in you. Something important is waiting for you here. Think about the person you were before you knew them. Now think about who you became because they existed in your life. Somewhere between those two versions of you, they left something behind. Maybe you became softer in places where you once guarded yourself. Maybe you learned patience. Maybe they taught you to laugh at things that used to feel too serious. Maybe a phrase they always used still enters your mind at unexpected times. These things can seem small until you realize what they actually mean. A meaningful relationship can continue influencing the way you move through the world even after the person is gone. Their impact does not require you to pretend they are still physically beside you. It simply asks you to recognize that love can leave fingerprints on a life. And there is one realization people often discover only much later. The most meaningful gift someone leaves behind may not be an object at all. It can be a way of seeing yourself that you learned through their eyes. Remember how they looked at you when you doubted yourself. Remember the version of you they believed existed beneath your uncertainty. What if part of their message was simply asking you not to abandon that person now? Stay till the end, because this is where the meaning begins to turn. Maybe they would want you to stop carrying every unfinished sentence as though you were required to solve it. Human relationships are never perfectly completed. There is almost always another conversation we could have had, another photograph we could have taken, another ordinary afternoon we would gladly return to. Yet unfinished does not mean meaningless. Sometimes it means something mattered enough that no amount of time would ever have felt completely sufficient. Now imagine, just for a moment, that you could sit together again, not to change anything, not to ask impossible questions, but simply to listen. Would the person you love want every memory of them to become a reason for you to stop moving forward? Or would they recognize something beautiful in seeing you continue, carrying what was good, learning from what was difficult, allowing yourself to experience laughter without guilt and new beginnings without feeling that you have betrayed the past. There is a difference between leaving someone behind and carrying their influence forward. You do not have to erase yesterday to step into tomorrow. But there is still one part of the message I have not opened yet. It concerns something they gave you long before you understood it was a gift, something you may still be carrying without realizing where it came from. And when you recognize it, one particular memory may suddenly make sense in an entirely different way. That is where the next part begins. There was one thing they gave you so quietly that you may never have called it a gift. It arrived without wrapping, without ceremony, without either of you realizing that one day you might look back and understand its value differently. Perhaps it was courage. Perhaps it was tenderness. Perhaps it was the strange confidence that came from knowing there was once a person who could see through your guarded moments and still recognize the goodness underneath. Whatever form it took, notice something now. Part of the way you face the world today may have been shaped inside moments you once considered ordinary. A conversation in a kitchen. A long drive with nowhere important to be. A joke that made both of you laugh at exactly the wrong moment. A disagreement that eventually taught you something neither of you could understand at the time. This is why their message cannot be reduced to a final sentence. The message was being written throughout your time together, quietly, in pieces. And one of those pieces may be returning to you now. What if the memory that keeps finding you is not asking to be solved? Sometimes the mind returns to a moment because that moment carries meaning, not because there is a hidden answer buried inside it. You might remember the way they said your name. The way they encouraged you when you could not see what they saw. Maybe there was something they repeated so often that you barely noticed it then. Keep going. Take care of yourself. Give it time. You can do this. Ordinary words can become extraordinary when we finally understand the love behind them. And perhaps this is the realization you were meant to reach. You do not need to invent a mysterious final message from someone you miss. Their real message can be found in what they consistently showed you while they were here. That is more grounded. More personal. And in many ways, far more powerful. But something changes when you look at those memories from where you stand today. You begin noticing details your earlier self could not have understood. Maybe there was a moment when they chose patience instead of frustration. Maybe they quietly made room for your dreams even when you were uncertain about them. Maybe they believed you would eventually become stronger than the version of yourself they knew. Don't skip this thought, because it may be the center of everything. Perhaps the gift was not merely that they loved you. Perhaps the gift was that, through loving you, they helped teach you how to recognize love when it appears, in kindness, in loyalty, in presence, in forgiveness, in the simple decision to remain gentle when life becomes complicated. And once you have learned that language, you can carry it somewhere they never had the chance to go. Then comes the question almost nobody expects. If they could see the next chapter of your life, what would you want them to see? Not a perfect life. Not a life without difficult days. Just a life that continues to expand around everything you shared. Imagine them seeing you laugh freely again. Imagine them seeing you discover something new and instinctively wishing you could tell them about it. Imagine reaching a milestone and remembering exactly what they would have said. That moment would not erase your missing them. It would reveal something quieter. Their influence traveled farther than either of you knew it would. You carried something forward. And maybe you have been afraid of that without ever putting it into words. Sometimes moving forward can feel strangely complicated because a part of you wonders whether healing changes the meaning of what happened. But healing does not require forgetting. A beautiful memory does not become less important because it hurts less someday. Love does not become smaller because your world becomes larger again. You are allowed to remember without remaining frozen inside the memory. You are allowed to keep what mattered and still make room for what comes next. Those two things can exist together. Now stay till the end of this thought, because there is another layer underneath it. Think of one quality you admired most in them. Not what they owned. Not what they achieved. Something deeper. Maybe they made people feel welcome. Maybe they found humor when everyone else became too serious. Maybe they were fiercely curious, quietly generous, endlessly determined, or wonderfully imperfect in a way that made being around them feel human. Hold that quality in your mind for a moment. Because what if the most meaningful way to carry their memory is not simply to remember that quality, but to let a little more of it exist through you? That changes the meaning of the gift. You are no longer standing only beside a closed chapter, looking backward at everything you wish you could revisit. You are standing at the beginning of something their presence helped prepare you for. Every kindness you learn from them can travel into another person's day. Every lesson can influence a decision they will never see. Every beautiful thing they awakened in you can continue creating consequences far beyond the time you shared together. This is not about pretending someone never left. It is about understanding that what people give us can outlive the moment in which it was given. And yet, there may still be one sentence you wish you could hear from them. One sentence capable of loosening something you have carried silently for longer than anyone realizes. Perhaps you already know which sentence it is. But before we reach it, there is something you need to understand about why you have been holding on to that unfinished conversation so tightly. Because once you see that clearly, the words you have been waiting for may mean something completely different. Some unfinished conversations remain with us not because we failed them, but because love rarely knows when it is speaking for the last time. That may be the peace you have been searching for without knowing how to name it. You remember certain words because now they seem heavier than they did when they were spoken. You remember a goodbye that felt completely ordinary. A glance you did not hold long enough. A question you meant to ask later. And somewhere inside all of that remembering, you may have quietly created an impossible expectation for yourself, that somehow you should have known which moment deserved more attention. But you were living inside the moment, not looking back at it from the future. You could not experience an ordinary day with the knowledge you have now. Perhaps understanding that does not remove the ache, but it can change what you ask of yourself. Because the message they would want you to understand would not be built around everything you failed to predict. It would be built around everything the two of you actually shared. And this is where one particular truth begins to rise above the others. The person you loved knew you as a whole human being. They knew you could become distracted. They knew you sometimes said the wrong thing, waited too long, changed your mind, became tired, misunderstood, tried again. They knew the imperfect rhythm of being close to you because they were imperfect too. Real love does not happen between flawless people who always recognize the importance of every moment. It happens in ordinary rooms, on rushed mornings, during ridiculous conversations, through misunderstandings and reconciliations, through laughter that arrives unexpectedly and silence that somehow feels comfortable. So if you have been reducing everything you shared to one thing you wish you had done differently, don't skip what comes next. One unfinished moment cannot contain the meaning of an entire relationship. There is another memory waiting underneath the one that hurts most. Look carefully. Maybe it is something almost embarrassingly simple. The two of you laughing until neither could remember what started it. Their face changing when you walked into the room. A familiar phrase. A tiny tradition nobody else would understand. The way they could tell something was wrong before you said anything. Those memories matter because they reveal what your mind sometimes forgets when it becomes focused on endings. There was an entire life happening before the goodbye. There were thousands of seconds in which nothing needed to be repaired because you were simply there together. And perhaps the message you have been waiting to hear begins inside those seconds. If they could speak from the love you genuinely experienced, not from fantasy, not from some impossible place, but from what their actions already taught you, perhaps the sentence would sound something like this: I hope you remember the love more than you remember the ending. Not because the ending should be ignored. Not because missing someone should be rushed. But because the ending was one moment, while the relationship was made from countless others. Something important is waiting for you inside that distinction. You are allowed to let the best memories become larger than the final one. Now notice what happens when you imagine tomorrow. There may still be a part of you that instinctively wants to tell them things. Something funny happens and for half a second you think of them. You hear a familiar song, pass a familiar place, notice something they would have loved, and the memory arrives before you invite it. That does not mean you are moving backward. Memory has its own strange timing. Sometimes it enters an ordinary afternoon simply because someone mattered enough to become woven into the way you notice the world. And perhaps instead of fighting every unexpected remembrance, you can allow some of them to become gentle. There you are again, you might think. Not as a literal presence. Not as something you need to prove or explain. Just as a memory carrying a piece of a life that once touched yours. But the sentence you have been waiting for goes deeper than remembrance. Because maybe there is something you have not fully permitted yourself to do yet. Maybe you have smiled and immediately felt strange for smiling. Maybe a new opportunity appeared and part of you wondered whether becoming excited about your future meant leaving something sacred behind. Maybe you have changed since they were here, and you wish they could meet the person you are becoming. Stay till the end of this thought. Growing around a loss is not the same as growing away from love. Your life becoming full again does not subtract from what someone meant to you. In fact, some of the strength with which you build that life may have come from knowing them. Imagine carrying one lesson from them into a day they never got to see. Perhaps you become patient with someone because they once showed patience to you. Perhaps you encourage someone because you remember what their encouragement felt like. Perhaps you finally attempt the thing they always believed you could do. Suddenly, something they gave you reaches another human being. Then perhaps that person carries it somewhere else. This is how influence can continue without anything supernatural being required. A person can change the direction of moments they will never personally witness simply because they once changed you. And now we are close to the part you may have needed most. If there is guilt inside your unfinished conversation, it does not have to become the permanent guardian of their memory. If there are words you never said, you can still allow those words to clarify how you love the people who remain in your life. Say what matters sooner. Stay a little longer when the moment deserves it. Notice ordinary days while they are still ordinary. Let what you wish you had known become wisdom rather than punishment. That may be one of the greatest gifts hidden inside everything you have carried. Because the final message was never meant to close your life around the past. It was meant to open something. And there is one last part of that message, the part connected not to who you were with them, but to who you are becoming without them physically beside you. It begins with a question you may never have asked yourself before. If they helped you become the person standing here today, what would it mean to truly honor that gift tomorrow? The answer may be hiding inside something you almost never think about. The person they knew was never meant to remain unchanged forever. You were always going to grow. You were always going to discover things neither of you could predict, enter rooms you had never seen, meet people whose names were not yet part of your story, and become versions of yourself that even you could not imagine. And perhaps that is why the question from the last moment matters so much. What would it actually mean to honor what they gave you tomorrow? Not by turning every day into a memorial. Not by measuring every decision against the past. But by allowing the good they awakened in you to remain alive inside the way you live. There is a quiet difference between carrying someone and carrying the weight of losing them. One can become part of your strength. The other can make you forget that they once wanted good things for you. Something unexpected happens when you understand this. The future stops looking like a place where their importance gradually disappears. Instead, it becomes a place where the meaning of what they gave you can take new forms. Think about it. A lesson they taught you at one age may mean something entirely different 10 years later. A sentence you barely noticed then may suddenly become exactly what you need now. Even an ordinary memory can change as you change. You return to it with different eyes and discover something your younger self missed. This is why love can remain meaningful without requiring you to remain where the relationship ended. You can carry the meaning forward while allowing your life to move. And perhaps there is one promise worth making, not to them, but quietly to yourself. When something beautiful happens again, let yourself experience it fully. When laughter arrives, do not interrogate it. When a new person brings warmth into your world, do not force that connection to compete with someone from your past. When an opportunity makes you feel alive, do not immediately ask whether you have earned the right to enjoy it. You do not honor love by refusing future joy. The people who matter to us become part of the reason we understand how precious joy is in the first place. But here is the part that may surprise you. You might have imagined their final message as something enormous, something dramatic enough to match the depth of what you feel. Yet the most truthful message may be far simpler. Remember me with love, but remember yourself too. Remember the dreams you talked about. Remember the plans you kept postponing. Remember the things that made your eyes brighten when you described them. Remember that your story was already moving forward while we were together. Keep writing it. Stay till the end of this thought, because there is something hidden inside those words. Continuing your story does not require closing theirs. Human beings are capable of carrying more than one truth at once. You can miss someone and have a beautiful day. You can remember yesterday and become excited about tomorrow. You can feel tenderness when their name appears in your mind and still open your heart to new experiences. None of those things cancel the others. They simply reveal how large a human life can become. There may even come a day when you remember them and the first feeling that arrives is not the heaviness of what ended, but gratitude for what happened at all. Perhaps you will catch yourself smiling at one of their ridiculous habits. Perhaps you will finally understand advice they gave you years too early. Perhaps you will tell someone a story about them and hear yourself laughing halfway through it. That does not mean the memory has become less sacred. It means the memory has learned how to breathe inside your present. And now, consider something even quieter. Somewhere in your life today, another person may already be receiving something that began with them. Maybe you listen more carefully because they once listened to you. Maybe you forgive differently because they taught you how complicated people can be. Maybe you notice lonely people in crowded rooms because they once noticed you. The chain can be almost invisible, yet completely real. What they gave you influences what you give. What you give influences someone else. A kindness travels farther than the person who first offered it could ever calculate. Don't skip this next realization. You may have been searching for the gift as though it were something they left behind for you to find. But perhaps the gift has been visible all along. It is what changed in you because you loved them. It is the patience you did not have before. The courage you borrowed until it became your own. The memories that taught you what deserves your attention. The understanding that ordinary days are not ordinary forever. The knowledge that words matter while there is still time to speak them. And above all, the realization that loving someone can expand your life even when you eventually have to continue without their physical presence. So tomorrow, notice one ordinary thing. The morning light entering a room. Someone calling your name. A conversation you normally rush through. A person you care about sitting close enough to hear you say what they mean to you. Be there for it. Not because something bad might happen. Not because you should live anxiously aware of endings. Quite the opposite. Be there because your past has taught you the value of being present without needing fear to make the moment important. And perhaps that is what they would most want their memory to give you. Not fear of losing what you love, but a deeper ability to recognize it while it is here. Still, there is one final door we have not opened. Because everything so far has been about what they gave you. But there is another side to this message, something you gave them that you may have underestimated all this time. Something that could change the way you remember your entire relationship. And when you finally see what it was, you may realize that the message you have been waiting to receive was also, in its own quiet way, a message you had already given them. Maybe you have spent so much time thinking about what they left inside your life that you never considered what your presence placed inside theirs. And this matters more than it first appears. Because when someone is gone, memory can become strangely one-sided. You remember what they taught you, how they comforted you, the moments when their voice changed the direction of your day, but you may forget that you were part of their world too. You were not simply standing there receiving their love. You were giving something back, often without realizing it. Your laughter became part of their memories. Your questions became conversations they carried with them. Your strange habits, your imperfect timing, the things that made you unmistakably yourself, all of that belonged to their experience of being alive. And if you have ever wondered whether you showed them enough, stay with this thought, because the answer may not be hiding inside the grand moments you keep examining. It may be inside the ordinary ones you barely remember. There were probably times when you made their day lighter without knowing it. A message you sent casually. A story you told that they remembered longer than you did. A moment when you sat beside them without trying to fix anything. Perhaps you made them laugh on a day when they needed laughter. Perhaps they looked forward to seeing you more than they ever said aloud. Perhaps your presence gave a familiar shape to their world. The kind of comfort people rarely announce because, while it is happening, it simply feels like life. Something important is waiting for you inside that realization. Love is not only measured by the moments you can clearly recall. Some of its most meaningful evidence disappears into routine precisely because it became so natural. Think of how many times you probably said their name without remembering the occasion. How many meals were shared, how many tiny decisions included them, how many moments began with, "You have to hear this." You cannot possibly recover every one of those memories, and you do not need to. Their value did not depend on being preserved perfectly. They mattered because they were lived. This may be difficult to accept when your mind keeps searching for one final piece of proof that they understood how much you cared. But affection is often communicated long before anyone finds the perfect words for it. It appears through attention, familiarity, showing up, knowing which story they are about to tell before they finish the first sentence, remembering how they take their tea or what makes them laugh, noticing when their silence sounds different. Those things may look small from the outside. From inside a relationship, they can mean everything. And now comes the part you may have overlooked. They knew things about you that nobody else knew in quite the same way. Not secrets necessarily, just details. The expression you made when you were pretending not to be excited. The subjects you could talk about endlessly. The way you behaved when you were tired. The dreams you mentioned casually because you were afraid to call them dreams. For some portion of their life, they carried a unique understanding of you. But the reverse was also true. You carried an understanding of them that belonged specifically to your relationship. That means what existed between you was never replaceable, because no future relationship can recreate the exact two people you were in those exact years. Don't skip the meaning hidden there. Something does not need to continue forever in the same form to have been complete in the moments when it was real. Maybe this is where the unfinished conversation begins to soften. You wanted another chance to tell them what they meant to you. That desire makes sense. But what if some version of that message had already reached them through the life you shared? Through the times you stayed. Through the times you returned after disagreement. Through the concern in your voice when something was wrong. Through the completely ordinary assumption that there would always be another conversation tomorrow. None of this creates certainty about every thought they had, and it does not need to. It simply reminds you that relationships communicate through far more than final words. Now imagine taking every good thing you wish you could still give them and allowing it to move outward instead. The patience. The appreciation. The extra minute you wish you had spent listening. The words you wish you had spoken sooner. None of those impulses have to disappear because their original destination is gone. They can become part of how you treat the people who are still beside you. Tell someone they matter while the sentence can still become part of an ordinary afternoon. Listen without waiting for your turn to speak. Notice the person who always notices everyone else. Make time for the conversation you keep postponing. Not from fear. From awareness. From understanding that attention is one of the simplest forms of love we can actually give. And there is another beautiful possibility. Somewhere ahead, you may become for someone else what this person once became for you, a voice they remember when they need courage, a source of kindness they eventually pass forward, a person whose small actions become meaningful years later. You may never know when it happens. Most people do not. We rarely witness the full distance our influence travels. So perhaps the message you had already given them was never one perfect sentence. Perhaps it was your presence. You were there for part of their journey. You made memories with them that could only have existed because you were there. You changed some of their days simply by entering them. You gave them stories, laughter, questions, affection, frustration, reconciliation, companionship, the wonderfully imperfect evidence that two lives genuinely crossed. And if you could return for 1 minute, maybe you would still say all the words you wish you had said. Of course you would. But perhaps you would also notice something you missed before. They already knew you in the language of everyday life. And now there is only one piece left, the quietest part of the message, the one that does not ask you to remember more, search harder, or understand everything. It asks something far simpler of you. When their memory visits you again on an ordinary day, what if, instead of asking what you lost, you allowed yourself to remember what you were fortunate enough to have? Because that question leads to the final message. And it may be the gentlest one of all. One day, perhaps when you are not searching for it at all, their memory may arrive differently. Not through a dramatic moment. Not because you deliberately return to the past. It may happen while sunlight falls across a familiar room, while you hear an old expression they used to say, or while someone laughs in a way that brings back a tiny detail you thought you had forgotten. And for one quiet second, instead of immediately thinking about the fact that they are gone, you may remember the extraordinary fact that they were here. That you found each other in this enormous world. That your lives overlapped long enough for their name to become meaningful to you. That there were days when hearing their voice was completely normal, when their presence required no explanation, when neither of you understood that ordinary moments were quietly becoming memories. Perhaps this is where the final message has been leading, not toward an answer that removes every difficult feeling, but toward a different way of holding what remains. Because there is something almost nobody tells you about meaningful memories, they are allowed to change. A memory that once felt heavy can someday become warm. A place you once avoided can eventually remind you of laughter. A sentence that once made you wish for one more conversation can later make you grateful the conversation happened at all. None of this follows a schedule, and none of it needs to. You do not have to force yourself toward any particular feeling. But when a softer moment arrives naturally, you are allowed to receive it. Don't skip that permission. You do not betray someone by allowing the memory of them to become gentler. You do not diminish the importance of a relationship when remembering it begins to bring more gratitude than pain. Sometimes that softness is simply another chapter in what love becomes when time continues moving. And now, think about the message you imagined waiting for you at the beginning of this journey. Perhaps you expected something secret. Something they never had the chance to reveal. But maybe the deepest message was never hidden. Maybe it had been repeated in 100 different forms while they were beside you. In the way they listened. In the concern behind a simple question. In the moments they encouraged you to try again. In the plans they wanted you to pursue. In every ordinary indication that your happiness mattered to them. We cannot know the exact words another person would choose if they were here now, and pretending otherwise would make this message less meaningful, not more. But we can look honestly at the love they showed while they were here. And sometimes that gives us enough to understand what direction their care was pointing. It was pointing toward life. Toward you continuing to become yourself. Toward mornings they would never see, decisions they could never make for you, and possibilities neither of you could predict. Perhaps they once encouraged something in you that you still have not pursued. Perhaps they believed in a quality you continue to underestimate. Perhaps they simply enjoyed seeing you happy. Whatever was genuinely true between you, let that truth matter more than imaginary conversations you can never verify. The evidence of love is not only found in what someone might have said at the end. It is found in what they consistently gave while they had the chance. Stay till the end of this moment, because here is where everything we have uncovered begins to come together. The gift was not a mysterious object waiting somewhere outside you. It was not a secret sign you were supposed to notice. The gift was the part of your life that became richer because another person shared some of their time with you. It was what you learned. What you gave back. What you noticed because of them. What you now understand about presence, patience, laughter, forgiveness, and saying what matters while people can still hear it. And perhaps the greatest way to receive that gift is to use it. Use it when someone you love needs your attention. Use it when you are tempted to postpone a meaningful conversation. Use it when someone believes in you and you are struggling to believe in yourself. Use it when an ordinary afternoon seems too unimportant to remember. Because you know something now that you may not have known before, ordinary moments can become some of the most precious parts of a life. And if there is one sentence worth carrying from all of this, perhaps it is not a sentence spoken for them. Perhaps it is one spoken quietly to yourself. I can remember with love and still continue with hope. There is room for both. There is room to miss their presence and appreciate what remains. There is room for old photographs and new experiences. There is room for the person you were when they knew you and the person you have not become yet. Your future does not erase your history. It carries everything that shaped you into places your past could never reach. So when something wonderful happens someday and your first instinct is to wish they could see it, allow that thought to come. Smile if the smile arrives. Remember what they might genuinely have appreciated about that moment based on who they were when you knew them. Then return to the life happening in front of you. Be there for it. Fully. Because presence is one of the lessons your memories have been trying to teach you all along. And maybe, years from now, you will tell someone about this person. You will describe something funny they used to do. You will repeat a piece of advice they gave you. You will explain how they changed the way you see something. And suddenly, without planning it, a small piece of their influence will enter another person's life through your words. That is how some gifts keep traveling. Not mysteriously. Humanly. Quietly. From one life into another. And perhaps that is the message you were meant to discover, not that love prevents endings, but that an ending does not erase what love already created. You were loved in ways you can remember. You loved in ways they experienced. You shared a portion of this life together. And now you are allowed to carry the best of it forward, not as a weight that keeps you facing backward, but as something gentle that reminds you to notice the life still unfolding around you. Because the final gift was never asking you to remain in yesterday. It was teaching you how deeply today deserves to be lived. And yet, just when you think the message has finished, one final realization appears, the kind that does not arrive loudly, but settles into you slowly. Maybe the reason you kept searching for one more message was never because the love between you lacked an ending. Maybe it was because some part of you still wanted permission to carry that love differently. Not to release the person from your memory. Not to make what happened smaller. Simply to stop asking every beautiful memory to carry the sadness of the goodbye beside it. Because a memory can be meaningful without hurting every time it returns. A name can still matter without closing the room around you. And a chapter can remain precious even while another chapter begins. There is a moment waiting somewhere in your future that you cannot see yet. An ordinary moment. Perhaps you will be walking somewhere unfamiliar, sitting beside someone you have only recently come to know, or standing in a place you once dreamed about reaching. Something will happen, a phrase, a sound, a tiny coincidence of memory, and suddenly you will think of them. But this time, your first thought may not be, "I wish you were still here." It may simply be, "You would have loved this." Notice the difference. It is small, almost invisible, but something inside it has changed. The memory is no longer pulling you entirely backward. For a moment, it is standing beside your present, allowing yesterday and today to exist together. Don't skip what that means. You never needed to choose between remembering them and continuing your life. That choice was never required of you. Human hearts are capable of carrying history while still making room for discovery. You can treasure the person who once knew your younger self and still allow new people to know who you are becoming. You can keep an old photograph and make new memories. You can revisit a familiar place and later discover somewhere completely different that becomes meaningful for reasons you cannot yet imagine. Nothing new has to compete with what came before. Perhaps that is one of the quietest gifts they left you, the knowledge that connection is worth risking your heart for. Think about what loving them taught you. It taught you that another human being can become part of the architecture of your everyday world. That someone's happiness can matter to you almost as naturally as your own. That time shared with another person can shape your character in ways neither of you notices while it is happening. And yes, meaningful connection can leave an empty space when circumstances change. But that does not make the connection a mistake. The fact that something mattered enough to be missed is also evidence that something mattered enough to be lived. Now imagine the person you love as you genuinely knew them, not as a perfect figure created by memory, but as the wonderfully complicated human being they actually were. Remember their quirks, their stubborn moments, their unexpected kindness. The things they worried about that eventually seemed unimportant. The way they could make you laugh without trying. Remembering someone honestly can be more loving than turning them into someone flawless. Because real affection did not require perfection when they were here. It should not require perfection now. Something important is waiting for you inside that honesty. When you allow yourself to remember the whole person, you may also begin allowing yourself to remember the whole relationship. Not only its final chapter. Not only the conversations you wish had gone differently. The ridiculous moments too. The boring ones. The afternoons when nothing memorable happened. The times you annoyed each other and forgot about it by dinner. The plans that worked and the plans that absolutely did not. All of it belonged to the story. And perhaps the story becomes gentler when you stop asking its ending to explain everything that came before. There is another question worth carrying for a moment. What would change if, whenever their memory returned, you asked not, "Why did this have to end?" but, "What did having this person in my life teach me to notice?" Maybe you would notice people more carefully. Maybe you would stop assuming there will always be another convenient time to express appreciation. Maybe you would protect your attention from things that do not deserve so much of it. Maybe you would laugh more freely when the opportunity appears. Maybe you would finally begin something you have postponed for reasons that no longer seem convincing. That is where remembrance becomes movement. Not because you are trying to turn loss into some perfect lesson. Life is rarely that neat. Some questions remain unanswered. Some feelings return without explanation. Some days are simply quieter than others. You do not need to transform every memory into wisdom. But when wisdom does emerge naturally, you can use it. You can allow what you experience to make you more present rather than more afraid. And perhaps, after everything, that is what the message would sound like if we built it only from the love you truly knew. Live the days in front of you. Notice the people who are here. Say the kind thing while there is an opportunity to say it. Take the photograph, but also put the camera down sometimes. Make the call you keep postponing. Laugh when something is funny without asking whether you should. Let new memories arrive without forcing them to apologize for being new. And when my memory finds you, you do not always have to become sad to prove that I mattered. Because I already mattered. We already happened. Nothing about tomorrow can change that. Now something inside the message becomes complete. The gift was never a command to hold tighter. It was permission to hold differently, with open hands instead of clenched ones. To keep the love, keep the lessons, keep the ridiculous stories and the tiny details that nobody else would understand, while allowing your life to continue becoming larger around them. But there is still one final thing you may someday realize. You have spent all this time wondering what message they would leave for you. Years from now, after you have lived more, loved more, discovered more, and carried their influence into places neither of you could have imagined, you may understand that your life itself became an answer. Every time you chose kindness because they once showed you kindness. Every time you stayed present because losing them taught you the value of attention. Every time you allowed yourself to love again without comparing one human being to another. Every time you remembered them with a smile that arrived before the sadness. Those moments quietly answered the message. They said, "What you gave me did not disappear. I carried it forward." And somewhere beyond the next morning, beyond the next unexpected memory, beyond all the chapters you have not lived yet, there is another realization waiting, one that has almost nothing to do with goodbye and everything to do with the life you are still capable of creating. That is where the message changes one last time.